All right, here we are. Last mini review morning session before the AP exam. I'm trying to decide what topic to do. Definitely not one of my favorites, but could be important in regards to placing information in the correct context in the right time period in history. So our final topic today is none other than political parties. So we find ourselves at the Constitutional Convention, and of course we spent some time reviewing the dissension between political viewpoints between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. Of course, our Federalists believe in a strong central government. That is an inheritance of what used to be a monarchical form of government. We have our Anti-Federalists who are fearful of any form of strong government. They have scars from the monarchical form of government. They've fought a revolution, and they want to make sure that the rights in which people have died for in the revolution are never infringed upon by a strong central government. So when it comes time to put together a constitution, we see two camps. We see the Federalists who are advocates for ratification of the Constitution, and we see the Anti-Federalists who are supportive, but they want to make sure that all rights are secure. In that case, they want a Bill of Rights added to the Constitution. We then begin our nation with this new set of laws and this Constitution, and it does not take long before our first presidential cabinet recognizes difference between political thought. In the future of the United States, we had the Jeffersonian vision, the agrarian vision of America's future representing the common man, which emerges into our first Democratic Republican, an actual political party that holds weight and holds contribution from members of America to identify as being part of a political party. Of course, our Federalists, under the direction of George Washington and led by Alexander Hamilton, also represent a different vision. They represent the manufacturing vision of America and the strong national government's role throughout America. So we get this two-party system that emerges that even George Washington in his farewell address warned the country not to get involved in, believing that it may tear the country apart someday. These different political ideologies. Well, as we leave the Democratic Republicans and into the Federalists, what we will see happen is over time the Democratic Republican Party will absorb most of the political thought. The Federalists will not be able to sustain their representation of the elite, their pro-British ways, and ultimately during the War of 1812 they want to actually leave the Union, talk of secession, and that ultimately is their demise. So we get a string of Democratic Republican presidents thereafter. We have to get to our seventh president before we recognize that there is a two-party system yet again emerging in regards to the Andrew Jackson camp, who drops the Republican part of the Democratic Republicans and establishes the Democrat Party. We're talking about the 1820s into the 1830s as far as the timeline goes. On the other side, there's a growing fashion that is some of the leftover old Federalist principles and ideologies known as the Whig Party. They believe in using the federal government for infrastructure. They believe in using the federal government like Hamilton did with the Federalists in establishing a national bank and supporting a national bank. And they also are adversaries, or we could say they were kind of the response to the Jacksonian presidency, and we called them the Whigs. From there, we find ourselves with a few third parties starting to emerge in the 1830s and into the 1840s. Our first third party would be called the Liberty Party. And the Liberty Party really had two factions within it. It had really staunch, strong-feeling abolitionists who wanted to end slavery, but they also had individuals who later will become known as the Free Soil Party, who wanted to do everything possible to keep slavery contained. In other words, stop slavery from spreading to the West. Once we kind of move towards the Civil War, we see the Democratic Party centered more throughout the South in defense of slavery. It doesn't mean there weren't Northern Democrats, but our Northern Democrats tended to be more pro-business and pro-manufacturing, whereas our Southern Democrats were trying to do their best to hold on to the institution of slavery. And of course, we see in competition against Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats, we see the emergence of a brand new political party, some of which are leftover Whigs, some of which are Free Soilers, some of which are from the Liberty Party, and they find their candidate who has a strong message of stopping the spread of slavery to the West, known as Abraham Lincoln. Of course, the name of that party is the birth of what is called the Republican Party. And then for most of history, other than we have a third party who kind of has made some inroads in the 1850s and exited as well, tried to build a coalition on nativism. They are called the American Party, but better known as the Know Nothing Party. And they too are trying to pull from the growing Republican Party and pull from the Democrat Party and create a base of anti-foreignism. They are strong in parts of New York and parts of the northern part of the country, but it never takes root throughout the country. Even though Democrats and even though Republicans may have shared some of the views, the natives' views of the American Party or Know Nothing Party, it never really grows into a national political party. It remains on the fringes of just a third party in American history. As we move in after the Civil War and into the 1870s and then into the 1890s, what we have here is the Gilded Age. And what the Gilded Age has done is it's really exploded the capitalist system that's in America. And it's left another half of Americans in poverty, and it's also created big business, and there's a call for government action to remember the common man. And of course, this third party emerges, probably one of the strongest third parties in American history, known as the Populist Party. And of course, the Populist Party has more success than any other third party in U.S. history because of not only the number of people they're able to seat at the local level, at the state level, and eventually the national level, but their ideas and their platform actually materialize down the road. And what we see is in some progressive amendments specifically, as well as the 16th Amendment, for example. Moving forward, we're going to see third parties fade, and we're going to see the Democrats and Republicans, adopt what is known as populism for the duration of the future. When I mean populism, they're going to have to adopt what it is that is relevant to that generation of Americans. And we'll see some transfer. We'll see some Republican ideas in one time period become Democrat ideas the next period. And likewise, Democrat ideas become Republican ideas in the other period. One thing that holds true is that there always is an invitation for a third party to emerge in United States history. There also has been a two-party system ever since in regards to, since specifically here 1900 moving forward, we've had our Democrat Party and our Republican Party. I just wanted to kind of review specifically which parts of history when these parties emerged. I'll do a quick rundown one more time. Our first two parties, obviously at the Constitutional Convention, we're talking in the 1780, 1787, 1789, 1790s, our Federalist and our Anti-Federalist. Once we get to the election of 1800, we now have our Democratic Republicans and our Federalists. As we move from the 1800s into the 1830s, we see a new party emerge. We see the common man Jeffersonians become the common man Democrats, and we see the old Federalists kind of merge into what were called the Whigs. Of course, in the 1840s, we have not only the Liberty Party emerging, but also the Know Nothing Party that kind of begins and then carries on up into the 1860s. And then, of course, after the Civil War, we find our leading up to the Civil War, we find ourselves in 1852, 1858, and of course, the election of 1860, electing a Republican president to the United States. And of course, our populists, we don't want to forget as well, they're going to emerge, I would say, from the 1870s through the 1890s, up until the 1896 election with William Jennings Bryan, kind of the height of the movement, and then not being elected kind of, fizzled out after that part. I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't confuse you. Political parties will play a major role somewhere throughout the AP exam. Thanks for your time.